Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, January 30th, 2026, and today we're talking deer fencing, what is standing in the way of history that I want to learn, which will or possibly won't make sense presently, and it is Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, happy Friday, everyone, and happy last day of January, or at least for the show, last day of January. The next time I see you, it will be the second month of the 26th year of the 2000th year since we've started counting years. Neat. I will be heading to the Oak Conference shortly, so I'm looking forward to that. If you're there, make sure to stop by and say hi. I'm not presenting this week. I have really slowed down on all the conference presentations that I used to do, mostly just because I basically give a presentation every day here, but I also find it's nice to just attend to these things sometimes, hang out with my friends, learn some stuff, conference things. So it should be a fun weekend. There is still almost nothing going on here on the farm beyond a small amount of thawing every day. So I basically spend my days, breaking up some ice and digging some stuff out. I'm running out of stuff that needs digging out, though, so I look forward to today for a little conference and a little change of pace. Also wanted to say that you can always send your 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@no-tillgrowers.com. I appreciated the one yesterday, in fact, from the storm aftermath, so feel free to send those along. Oh, and I'm hearing there is a possible bomb cyclone coming up. That's like snow with hurricane force winds coming up for the East Coast this weekend. Yikes, y'all. Be safe. We'll be thinking of you. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about shallots and earwigs. So many great comments on that particular topic that day. Truly one of the best showings that the comment section has had. So I won't be able to get to all of them. At Nick Zivs wrote, quote, "For earwigs, steer clear of oil traps unless you can somehow prevent animals, namely skunks and raccoons, from getting into them. They work, but you run the risk of waking up one morning to vegetable/canola/rapeseed oil being spilled all over. Newspaper or corrugated cardboard traps are ideal, and as mentioned, you can simply knock the earwigs out the following morning into a bucket of soapy water. No potential for mess. If you go with a rolled up newspaper or magazine, then it's worth fanning out the pages some to create gaps between the pages for the earwigs to settle in and slightly dampening it a bit, if need be, with a light misting." End quote. Great details there. And one thing, if you want to use any sort of pest trap that other macro pests might enjoy, looking at you, beer traps and raccoons, then I recommend putting the bug trap inside of a closed live trap. That way, the bigger animal can't get in. At Freeland Farm asked how much time between germination and transplanting shallots when using the soil blocks, and the answer for that is basically 3 months, give or take. So we start them in early January and then plant them in mid-March. It wouldn't take that long if you had grow lights and kept them indoors, just where they're basically growing a lot faster. In that case, probably 2 months or less would be fine. But really, you can transplant the shallots or whatever onions anytime after they germinate, really. Just getting that good tall growth first is preferred, because the bigger the transplant going into the soil, the bigger the onion that you're going to get coming out of it. So at Cecilia Olivares, it's probably one of those, said they've had success as far south as northeast Tennessee with the gray Grizel variety. So there's hope for you in the lower latitudes with shallots. That's cool to hear. On the yarrow front, at Brandy Stack wrote, quote, "Professional cut flower growers typically grow yarrow as an annual to grow it for 2 years, then till it in and replant. They could dig up the yarrow," talking about our commenter that day, "broad fork and amend the bed, then divide the yarrow and only plant back about half or less, and it should bounce back. Alternatively, they could just replant with some new starts or seeds. Sometimes short-lived perennials just get tired. The earwigs are probably just sheltering there because it's undisturbed and not actually causing much harm." End quote. Again, lots of stuff like that throughout the threads. Great stuff. And shouts to everyone for showing love to all the people suffering the ice. We are just not equipped, like those of you up north, for snow and ice. It's not maybe our strong suit. On Tuesday, we covered February on the farm, bed shapers versus rotary plows, and the standing soil blockers. I mentioned in February we'd be grafting the tomatoes, and at The Embryo wrote, quote, "I love your channel. Thanks. Thanks for all the info about February plans. Good to know about grafting healing time," end quote. And this is something that I didn't, entirely factor in the first year that I grafted. it worked out, but you have to think with grafting that you are effectively stalling a plant for like 10 full days or more. Like you grow it, then you say, okay, chill in this closet for almost a week while you heal. Then you slowly introduce more and more light to the plant and it will slowly start growing again. So whatever your plan is for when you want to, plant the tomatoes or cucumbers or whatever you plan on grafting, you really do have to add a full 2 weeks or so to keep things on track. Also, though, make sure you know how to grow tomato starts really well before ever thinking about grafting. That day at his Mrs. Austin, maybe, wrote, quote, Southern Middle Tennessee, the high tunnel lettuce and spinach survived the ice and snow. A week of teen highs and single-digit nights might do them in. You're spurring me on to happy days ahead, end quote. Happy days are coming, I'm sure. It's amazing what those plants can survive, though. The nights have all been in single digits here as well, and the lettuce I have in the tunnel is still kicking, albeit underneath like 2 layers of R30 row cover and a tunnel that mostly has been covered in thin, lingering layer of snow, ice, but still pretty impressive. Spinach is incredibly resilient, depending on the variety. I have regularly overwintered spinach in the field with very little loss. This year would have probably been the exception had I tried it, but I didn't, luckily, so I don't have to worry about that. Anyway, tough stuff, these crops. Shouts to spinach also as a crop I neglected to mention in terms of what I start in February. It is also one. Kale, too. I often start kale in February as well. I'm going to wait for the fall this year because I don't really need spring kale so much. It's not a big profit crop for us. Anyway, on Wednesday, we had Lincoln Fishman on to chat about living mulches, which was a blast. Loved talking to Lincoln. Always enjoy those conversations. Loads of great comments on that thread as well. It seems like you all enjoyed it as much as I did. Snowflake Farm wrote, quote, what a happy coincidence. I was just geeking out this morning, re-listening to your interview with Helen and binging Living Pathway videos. I decided several weeks ago I'm going to try this on a good chunk of our bed, so I'm hunting information on the best way forward, and Momentum Ag sounds like a good place to start. Awesome interview as always, end quote. And the 2020 interview I did with Helen was one of my favorites, and I always love chatting with her. Her book is really good. Of course, as always, when trying a new system like Living Pathways, just start small. And if you're going to do mulch like right over the beds, there's a lot of stuff that will work in perennial mulch systems. But one thing that Lincoln and I didn't really get to was things like lettuces and carrots and that sort of stuff, which don't really work in that system. That's why I use more of like the Living Pathway system versus, like a living mulch system. But anyway, maybe one day he and I can actually explore that a little bit more on the show. All that said, living mulches, living pathways, all that stuff has to be really well planned out and, trial it small. At One Hope wrote, quote, slow start, but this developed into an incredible interview, end quote. And I agree about the slow start, but that is entirely on me. When the equipment is not working well, I get a little distracted and don't guide the conversation as well. Such is the nature of interviews, though. It's always an interesting challenge. Big shouts to Lincoln, though, for coming on, and super glad to hear you all enjoyed that one. Then on Thursday, we talked about chicken manure in the compost bin, aphids on the plant starts, and liability insurance for the U-Pick farms on the raw manure and bin convo. At Nana's Worms wrote, quote, with horse and cow manure, if composting worms have moved into the material, I say it's good to go. I always test for persistent herbicides before using in a worm bin or my garden, though. I've never tried it. Chicken manure, Sandra, end quote. Thanks. And so we didn't really get into like horse and cow manure, but horse and cow manures both generally have a higher carbon to nitrogen ratio than, chicken manure. So they may not be as potent to the worms. Though if it's fresh, I would still, maybe like cure it a little bit or compost both of them a little bit. I've seen some runny cow manure out there. That should probably use some carbon mixed in for sure. The herbicide thing, though, is an important consideration, especially with the horse manure. If you don't know the manure's origins or really the food that the animals ate, origins, a little composting before adding to the worm bin is not a bad idea. Good stuff as always this week. You all rock. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, deer fencing. Oh, God. Get it? Like the deer fencing? I feel like it works. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Ohio Earth Food. So you got your soil tested or need your soil tested, it's time to contact Ohio Earth Food. Since 1972, they have been growers' trusted source for organic soil amendments to apply before you plant to prevent those deficiency symptoms that limit production. Their knowledgeable staff have all been a part of certified organic operations and can help you choose the best products for your soil and deliver or ship them right to your farm. With locations in Northwest Ohio and just north of Madison, Wisconsin, Ohio Earth Food wants wants to be your partner for organic inputs. Don't count on luck this year. Start your seeds in the Seed Catapult potting soil and put their Revita fertilizers in your beds, and rest assured that your plants will have all the nutrients, stimulants, and energy for whatever comes their way. Feed your soil and let your soil feed the plants. Visit them at ohioearthfood.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Adam Van Queek, who writes, quote, I noticed in one of your B-roll videos you used recently that there's a fence around your farm. Would you be able to show us how your fencing is constructed? Was the fencing always there? What made you choose your fence design? Also, how do you inventory your seeds? Is it by weight or packets? End quote. All right, so great questions here. Thank you. So I'll knock out the seed one first. In general, I prefer to inventory the seeds by individual seed count. The reason for that is that I transplant the vast majority of my crops, so I know if I need, for instance, 150 pepper plants, I don't have to, do the weight calculation to figure out how many seeds I have to buy, which of course you could also build into a spreadsheet if you wanted. But the same thing goes for things like Salanova. Each bed gets 450 plants. So depending on how many beds I have, I need at least 450 seeds for each one. You could do that by weight too, but most pelleted seeds like that are sold by count. Now, for something like arugula or radishes, weight is fine. And I often just end up keeping the inventory based on what unit that the company uses that I buy the seeds from. All that said, you shouldn't have a ton of inventory left at the end of the season to keep track of. After you do this for a while, the stuff I usually have left in inventory is like the experimental seeds that I bought or stuff I bought in the winter and decided I didn't really want to try or didn't have enough space for or whatever. Most of my main crops, I'm able to just buy exactly or close to exactly what I need. And then if I have to supplement throughout the season, I'll buy a little bit extra, but only what I need. That said, you could also be looking at your inventory throughout the season. So I can see a use for keeping hyper-specific counts. Now, on the deer fencing, our farm had a 4-foot tall woven wire fence around it when we arrived. And because we're in somewhat of a neighborhood, I assumed, somewhat correctly, thankfully, that the deer pressure would be like relatively minimal. So really, I didn't need to fence them out as much as discourage them from coming in. So what we did was buy basic plastic fence posts from Premier One Supplies. We then bought the electric rope, enough to run a top strand, a middle strand, and a bottom strand all the way around, but still had the Energizer from our old farm, what we call the suitcase Energizer, but I don't think they sell those anymore. There are plenty of Energizers out there though. That is what charges the electric fence, and it basically just sends a little shock every half second or so through the ropes. And we basically stuck those fence posts, I forget, every 12 feet or something on the fence itself. Like we just tied it to the fence and then strung the rope across that so it stands about 7 feet tall. Literally just imagine a 4-foot tall woven wire fence with a fence post sticking out of the top of it and woven wire going across those fence posts. And it works okay, but honestly, the best pest deterrent that we have in our neighborhood has been the several dogs who just like kind of run wild and patrol it. Now, the dogs have done some damage to our farm, killing chickens and such, but our deer pressure is almost non-existent. The time when our deer pressure is the worst is always in a drought, when our vegetation is the only watery vegetation around for them, and the deer will go after that. So we have to account for that. Sometimes we'll cover stuff just knowing that the deer may be out and about for it. So anyway, is it a perfect design? No, absolutely not. And I guess that's the reason I don't really talk much about our deer fencing. In most scenarios, deer are just going to, jump a fence like that or go through it quickly. But for what we had or needed when we got here, it was a cheap fix. And for the most part, it's been fine. In a more rural situation, you would have to come up with something better, like what Eric Nordell described in our recent interview, or some sort of offset fence, etc. I've seen those offset fences work pretty well in some, like pretty rural locations. That is is like 2 smaller fences set 4 feet apart to take advantage of the deer's poor depth perception. So it can be done. For us, I chose to go high because I really just wanted to make it not worth the work for the deer to get through it or get over it. And please, don't tell the deer, but we haven't really electrified it in a couple of years. I took a whole section of it down, in fact, because it just hasn't really been much of an issue for us here. As always, context is everything in farming, including for your deer fencing. So anyway, I hope that explains the deer fencing pretty well. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we look at the history behind history. Behind history's history. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by High Mowing Organic Seeds. High Mowing Organic Seeds is celebrating their 30th anniversary with 48 fabulous new varieties for 2026. Highlights include downy mildew-resistant cucumbers, a poppy that looks like cotton candy, and 12 new tomato varieties. High Mowing offers more than 750 varieties of certified organic, non-GMO vegetables, flowers, herbs, and cover crops, all trialed for optimal performance in organic growing systems. High Mowing has the professional quality seeds and supportive grower reps to get you from seed to harvest. Visit highmowingseeds.com to request a catalog and use code 26NOTILL, all caps, for 10% off your order of $100 or more. That's highmowingseeds.com. All right, back to the show. So I kind of think of these last segments on Fridays as my time to, muse on whatever has been on my mind for the week. And this week it has been a lot of things on my mind this week. But one of the things is European history. I've been watching some random videos and documentaries, some about Vikings, one about Alexander the Great, one about the Greeks. And I find myself often just absorbing this stuff, looking for any little detail about the agriculture, about the lifestyle of the food producers, about the traditions of the ancient people. But almost inevitably, in every story, there is some power-obsessed ding-dong standing in the way, photobombing the entire picture. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand the historical impact of people like Alexander the Great or insert X historical figure, but I just don't think they're very interesting. I want to know about the peasants. I want to know more about the agrarians. I want to know more about the people who supplied the food and the medicine for the armies, the dissenters, the activists, the people of that time. Also the traditions. I want to see more of that, of the cultural traditions that, trickled down from the indigenous roots of the Romans or the Vikings or the Greeks or the Persians, etc. Cultural and religious practices that survived the colonization of those indigenous people of those lands. I want to hear more about those, last surviving tribes, not the power-obsessed dude who killed them and enslaved them, not the guy born into that power who may or may not have killed his father to assume the throne. Giant yawn for me there. I've talked about this before, but the first thing I do when I go to an art gallery is look for the paintings of the gardens, of the farms, of the farmers, of the people. Few things bore me more than the portrait of the king or the royal court. I want to see what is behind them. I want to see the cooks in the kitchen, the farmers in the fields, the commoners fighting for their common lands and their common heritage. I want to see those old garden designs. I want to hear those stories. Certainly do enough digging and you can find some of this information, not arguing that it doesn't exist. But I guess my point is that I wish we didn't have to dig so much. I wish it was the loss of traditions, of cultures, of languages was what we all as a populace found interesting. I often feel like until we stop glorifying the rich, privileged, and power hungry in the present, that we are relegating everyone else, myself and everyone listening to this podcast, to the background of our own history, of the history we are literally creating. The reason it's harder for me to find the art I'm actually interested in, the humans and agriculture of history, etc., is because that was not the focus of the artists and the other recorders at the time. And there are some very basic and reasonable, reasons for this. There probably wasn't a lot of money in painting gardens historically, sculpting farmers, preserving languages. People who could afford paintings didn't want to look at peasants. Moreover, oftentimes artists were having to make their own paints, construct their own canvases, find the time, the daylight. We are privileged in that way in our time to have such easy access to record-keeping tools. We can photograph without building a camera, for instance, which is convenient. We can buy our paints and canvases at the store, record what we want to, share it to the world instantly. So I guess if I have an aim with this segment, and I don't know that I really do, but if I do have an aim, it's to remind us all to record and appreciate what recording means to our own histories, to the history of the people of now, to capture the life that holds up the lives of the rich and powerful people who force their whims on the masses and will force their memories to the front of history unless we decide we just don't care. I think we owe it to that curious person in the future who, like me, just wants to know what it would have been like to be someone like themselves or just be another human all those years ago under that force, who wants to know how their ancestors lived thousands of years before that force took hold, before Europe was quote unquote founded. Anyway, that's where my brain is at on this Friday, one place at least. Let me know your thoughts, and we're going to call it a week. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is a super easy way to help us out. Just hit that like button, subscribe button, all those things. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Berry Center mug, that's fun. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com, or today at Oak if you want to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of January. Actually, it'll be February next time we talk, but you get it. You get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Simon Genters, Aaron Morissette, Kelly O'Dale, Natasha Caldwell, Patrick Weaver, Alex and Oliver, Dwight Yoder, Bill King, Doug, and Ian at Grindstone Farms. Big shouts to everyone who supports the show however you can. You all are amazing. All right, so as you will remember, from Monday, the story is that Lori, in her little shop of glass things, has received a mysterious package. Lori had not ordered anything, but it is addressed to her, so she opens the box, and inside it she finds a little planet, like just floating in a big glass box. It's just like this little orb floating there, a little Earth-like orb. And frankly, it's one of the most beautifully designed and just beautiful looking things that she's ever seen, and she's looking at it when a note falls out of the box and that reads, "Just add sunlight." And so dutifully, Lori takes the box to a window and the little ball-sized planet begins to spin. It's slow, turning similar to the Earth, rotating on its axis. Lori looks all around the box and can't see any gears or mechanisms, but is delighted by it. What a find. She watches it as it slowly greens up. In fact, it starts to change and little oceans sort of move around on it like time is passing, and the little continents move around as well a little bit. Then she notices little brown areas that seem like colonies or something maybe. They are moving quickly. Soon, little deserts pop up around the little brown spots, all on these little continents. Then she sees little cities. It's happening fast. Like within seconds, that landscape changes. Then suddenly, she sees an aircraft. The deserts continue to grow. Some of the little rivers dry up. One of the little cities gets buried in an ocean. It's all just happening incredibly fast. The deserts sort of march over the green, and within minutes, the green spinning planet is reduced to a lifeless spinning rock. Lori feels stunned. She actually kind of begins to weep. She sort of slowly moves the box, off of the shelf near the window into a shady place. And suddenly, it just sort of starts back where it was. It just sort of resets. Just a small, still planet again, ready to be brought into the light. That's it. The end. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you Monday. Bye.